Now, when we measure pressure, we typically use a pressure gauge. So we have to worry about pressure. We have actually two different ways of measuring pressure. We have absolute pressure, and we have gauge pressure. Absolute is, I would actually call this the true pressure. And gauge pressure is what we typically see when we use a air gauge or something to measure the pressure. So if I'm looking here at, let's say, a tire. So let's say we have a tire on an automobile, and there it is like so. And we get a tire gauge, you know, you go in the drawer, you open it up, take out a tire gauge, and then you check the tire pressure on your car. You can go to a gas station, have somebody do it, or you can just do it yourself. So let's suppose, for example, we measure the pressure in this tire, and the pressure is, say, 3 atmospheres in that tire. Now, we're driving home from school one day, and a nail happens to be in the middle of the road, and we just happen to find it. So, voila, all right, we look, and then the tire itself goes completely flat. So, if we look at the tire now, the tire is flat. So, we take our gauge, and then we read the tire pressure, and the gauge says that the pressure is 0 atmospheres. Why? Because the tire itself is flat. And the gauge says, well, gee whiz, you know, there's no air in the tire is flat, we've got to change it. All right? But the question is this, is the tire really flat? Is there no pressure in the tire? And the answer to that question is, it's not really true. It's a little bit of a lie. So if we actually looked at the pressure on the outside of the tire happens to be 1 atmosphere on the outside. So what must the pressure be on the inside of the tire? The true pressure on the inside of the tire is actually 1 atmosphere. It's kind of a weird thing because aren't we just used to living in 1 atmosphere? It's almost like we don't even think about it because it's kind of where we live. It's like asking a fish about water. The fish would say, water? What are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. So we live in 1 atmosphere. So as we walk around in our day-to-day thing, you say, I don't really feel any pressure. Well, it's kind of like the gauge pressure. We don't really feel anything. So we say that pressure is 0, all right, for the gauge pressure. But the absolute pressure in actual terms happens to be 1 atmosphere. So they're off. They're off by a factor of 1 atmosphere. So when we look here, if we take the absolute pressure, and subtract 1 atmosphere from it, that equals the gauge pressure. So notice that the gauge pressure is always going to be less than the true pressure. So in our sample right here, the absolute pressure was 1 atmosphere, whereas the gauge was reading 0 atmospheres. So in a problem in WebAssign, if they give you the gauge pressure here, know that the gauge pressure is actually 1 atmosphere less than the absolute pressure.